as tributes are paid to him from around the world. One from President Zuma calls him the man who taught South Africans to overcome hatred. Mr. Mandela's funeral will take place in 9 days' time. Outside his final home in Johannesburg, this is the scene live as South Africans gather to honour the man who changed their country forever. Other gatherings are taking place in other parts of South Africa.
In Soweto, I'm Karen Giannoni in Soweto, outside Nelson Mandela's former home. It's a very different scene. People are dancing and celebrating his life.
We will be looking back at some of the iconic moments of that life, including this one when he walked out of prison after 27 years. Welcome. This is BBC World News with coverage, of course, of Nelson Mandela as he is remembered and as his life is celebrated in many different parts of the world. He was, of course, South Africa's first black president, but he also had a unique place in the public consciousness as a world leader, someone of international renown and someone who was loved and held in the utmost respect in many different corners of the world. Let's go live now to Soweto and the BBC's Karen Giannoni, who's been broadcasting from the street, Karen, where Nelson Mandela once lived.
That's right, Michelle, one of his former homes, and it has become such a place of focus. He briefly went to it after his release from prison. It is now a museum, and now people are gathering in their hundreds, if not thousands. They have been for the last few hours, and since the night news broke last night. But I have to say, the festive atmosphere is somewhat surprising. It is chanting, it is celebration, it is singing in the streets, and the crowds are getting bigger and bigger. Now, one of the legacies of Nelson Mandela's terms in office, his whole life really, is this so-called Rainbow Nation after white minority rule was ended when he was voted into power in 1994 in the first democratic multicoloured elections. And the fear was among many sections of the white population that this would be the end of a civilized state in South Africa and that war or violence would continue. But something managed to be gripped back by Nelson Mandela. He managed to reassure people and help them feel that he was watching out for every section of South African society. But let's have this look from James Robbins on the legacy he's left the South African people.
Nelson Mandela was born in 1918 in South Africa's Eastern Cape, a member of the local tribal royal household. In the 1950s in Johannesburg, when he set up as a lawyer in partnership with Oliver Tambo, their work, legal and political, challenged apartheid, the huge edifice of law which made racism legal and reserved for South Africa's white minority the wealth, power, education and jobs denied to the majority. The state crushed all opposition or defiance.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people.
Mandela led an armed campaign of ANC sabotage against the state. He was eventually arrested and charged with conspiracy to overthrow the government. At his trial, he made a 3-hour speech from the dock, including a pledge to give his life, if necessary, for freedom and democracy. Words which echoed down his 27 years in prison, and an example which inspired so many others. Antoinette Peterson is still coming to terms with her loss as a schoolgirl in the 1970s. Look at her screaming grief. It's June 1976. And her 13-year-old brother Hector has just been shot and killed by the police, first victim of the Soweto uprising.
I never thought I would talk about what happened on the 16th of June, really. I never thought, because every time I spoke about it, I just become traumatized, confused. So I said, but Mandela went to prison for 27 years and he kept on going. Why can't I do the same?
Hedwig used to teach in a whites-only school, used to believe Nelson Mandela was a terrorist.
If you feel uncomfortable, or you have done something that...
Now she rejoices in the change to multiracial education. But back in the 1990s, she was really scared when Nelson Mandela was finally freed from prison.
Was it going to be safe for white South Africans? You know, will we be able to move around the way we used to? Are we now going to be thrown into jail because we're white? He started talking and sort of reassured people that this country is now going to work together. And there's never, ever going to be a thing like apartheid in South Africa. That set our minds at rest.
There are thousands, probably millions of other South Africans who have similar stories to tell. And they help explain why, for them, Nelson Mandela was such a hero. Not the only hero, but a giant of his age.
When he was finally released from prison in 1990, it was Nelson Mandela's sheer stature, physical, moral and political, which transformed South Africa. He had to negotiate an end to white rule, but he also had to confront black people fighting and killing each other. Eventually, 4 years later, the country's first democratic multiracial elections delivered Nelson Mandela and the ANC a landslide victory.
So help me God.
Whatever problems today's South Africa still confronts, this was a new beginning and an astonishing testimony to one man's greatness. James Robbins, BBC News.
Well, let's hear something from the man himself. We're going to play you a bit now of a speech that Mr. Mandela made in Soccer City, not far from where we are in Soweto. It was his first major rally after his release from prison in 1990.
I appeal to you, therefore, as my comrade Walter has done, for discipline. It is discipline and loyalty to our principles that will liberate us. And I have not the slightest doubt that you are capable of behaving like people who are ready to make your contribution to the solution of the problems that are facing us, and also to address the greater question of the new society we want to establish. Comrades, friends, and the people of Soweto at large, I greet you in the name of the heroic struggle of our people to establish justice and freedom for all in our country.
One of the very first speeches that we heard from Nelson Mandela after he was freed from prison. Karen, you know, his story means so much to people from around the world. When I was growing up in the 1980s, it was the defining political issue of the moment. But you were born in South Africa, so it must have a very special significance for you.
Yes, it really does, Michelle. I was born not far from here in central Johannesburg, and we left here in 1976, just a month or so after the Soweto uprising, just in these streets here where so much violence occurred, so much blood was shed. We've just been hearing from Nigel, our cameraman, who was an ambulance driver in that very episode, that there are bullet holes around here and in Nelson Mandela's former house in the walls still showing. So yes, even though we left the country and emigrated, the story of Nelson Mandela and then his emergence from prison as something we've watched so closely, and also for people like my parents who are very strong supporters of the anti-apartheid movement, it has just been an incredible story to watch happening from afar, and also to come here and experience the South Africa of now since 1994.
And we can get a sense of that, because I can see that the scene behind you in Soweto, you know, there are people of different colours milling around right there. Such a different country to the one that you were born into.
It really is, because I remember going to the beach on visits to relatives and just being shocked, because growing up in the UK, obviously there was nothing like it, but seeing signs on the beach saying net blunkies, only whites, and different entrances into shops, different parts of the transport system. You'd go in first class if you were white, second class if you were coloured or Asian, and third class if you were black. And that sort of thing, I mean, just being treated as first class just because you were white was just so strange, because growing up in the UK, it was a real alien thing to a child visiting back then. So since then, you know, it has changed immeasurably. There are still so many things, so many challenges this country has, and just from the perspective of visiting it quite often, there are areas where you would say it's now economic apartheid rather than apartheid within the law. But it is truly amazing, and to hear of the opportunities that many black children are now getting that they just simply didn't get back then.
Yeah, that their parents couldn't dream of. Karan, we'll be back with you later on for more of our live coverage from Soweto, but for now, thank you. And for anyone